I'm telling you, that
This
man
ain't
keeps
normal.
coming around here. He's texting my daughter, taking her places. This ain't
Ma'am,
normal.
slow down. Right now, all I've got is a noise complaint and a car that already
Dude,
left.
she's 15. He's been buying her
Throwing
phones,
around
picking her up
serious
after that
accusations.
program.
At 6:47 p.m. on a Wednesday evening in Ocala, Florida, Officer Cedric Tate pulled his patrol car into the cracked parking lot of Pinewood Gardens, a low-income apartment complex on the city's southeast side. The dispatch had come in as a domestic disturbance, noise complaint, possible altercation. Cedric had handled dozens of calls at Pinewood before. Most ended with paperwork and nothing more. He stepped out, adjusted his vest, and activated his Bodycam. The red light blinked once and held steady. What he saw wasn't a fight. A teenage girl sat on the front steps of a ground floor unit, knees pulled to her chest, face buried in her arms. She was 15 years old. Her name was Kayla Simmons. Her mother, Rochelle Simmons, stood barefoot on the sidewalk, shouting at the taillights of a dark sedan pulling out of the lot. The car turned the corner and disappeared. Rochelle spun toward Cedric before he could speak. Her voice was raw. "That man has been coming around my daughter."
He's been taking her places, buying her things, texting her at night. Cedric looked at Kayla. She didn't lift her head.
"Ma'am, who are you referring to?" Rochelle's jaw tightened. "He's a cop. He works for your department. He runs some program with kids. That's how he found her." Cedric felt the shift in the air before his mind fully caught up. He looked at Kayla again. She still hadn't moved. The body cam on his chest kept recording, and somewhere behind the red blinking light, a chain of events had already begun that would reach far beyond this parking lot, far beyond this department, and into rooms where men in suits would eventually decide who kept their freedom and who lost it. Rochelle said the name without hesitation. Vincent Hargrove. Sergeant Vincent Hargrove. Cedric's stomach dropped. He knew exactly who that was. Every officer in the Ocala Police Department did. Hargrove was a 22-year veteran, white, broad-shouldered, with a handshake that lingered too long and a smile that showed up in every department newsletter and city press release. He ran the Youth Outreach Program, the one the mayor had praised at 3 consecutive budget hearings. He coached a community basketball league. He had a wall of commendation plaques in his office and a Rolodex of connections that stretched from City Hall to the state attorney's office. He was untouchable. And Rochelle Simmons had just accused him of grooming her 15-year-old daughter. Cedric crouched near the steps. "Kayla, can you tell me what happened?" Kayla didn't answer right away. Her fingers picked at the skin around her nails. Rochelle touched her shoulder. "Tell him, baby." It came out slowly, quietly. The body cam caught every word. "He started giving me rides home from the program. Then he started texting me. Then he bought me a phone. He said I was special. He said I couldn't tell anyone because they wouldn't understand." Her voice cracked. "Then he started touching me." Cedric stayed still. His training told him to keep the questions open. His instincts told him something else entirely. He knew what filing this report would mean. He knew whose name would be on it. And he knew that the moment that name entered the system, his own life inside the department would change in ways he couldn't take back. But the body cam was rolling, and a 15-year-old girl had just told him the truth. So he wrote it down. The next morning, Cedric walked into Lieutenant Craig Dunmore's office at 8:15 a.m. with the report printed, signed, and paperclipped to a copy of his body cam log. Dunmore was 51, white, a career administrator who had spent more years behind a desk than on the street. He had a reputation for keeping things smooth, not for keeping things right. Cedric placed the report on the desk. Dunmore read it slowly. "You need to be very careful with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. You need to be very careful with accusations like this. This girl, she's 15. Kids that age get confused. They exaggerate. Sometimes they flat out lie for attention." "That doesn't change what she told me on camera," Cedric said. Dunmore's eyes narrowed slightly. "You recorded it?" "It's on my body cam. Standard activation." Dunmore exhaled through his nose, looked at the report again, looked at the name. Vincent Hargrove. He folded his hands. I'm going to give you some advice, officer. Not as your lieutenant, but as someone who's been here a long time. Don't go down this road. That girl's story hasn't been verified. Hargrove is a decorated sergeant with 2 decades of service. You start throwing his name around in a report like this, you're going to create problems you don't want.
Cedric held his gaze. I'm not throwing anything around. I responded to a call. I documented what the victim told me. That's my job. Dunmore stared at him for a long moment. Then he picked up the report, placed it in a drawer, and closed it. I'll look into it. That's all for now. Cedric stood. He knew exactly what "I'll look into it" meant. It meant the drawer would stay closed, the report would go nowhere, and a 15-year-old girl would keep waiting for someone to believe her. The changes started within a week. Small at first, almost invisible. Cedric's regular day shift was reassigned without explanation. He was moved to the overnight rotation, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., covering the highest crime corridor in Ocala's southeast grid. When he asked a sergeant about it, the answer was short: staffing needs. His locker, which had been in the main row near the briefing room for 4 years, was relocated to the far corner of the basement level. No reason given, no memo. Entered the break room. A patrol partner entered the break room. A patrol partner he'd ridden with for 2 years requested a reassignment without telling him. Cedric heard about it from someone else. Then came the union visit. A rep named Dale Prescott, a thick-necked white man with a shaved head and a permanent half-smile, cornered Cedric near the vending machines one night before shift. "Just a friendly word," Prescott said, leaning against the wall. "People are talking, Tate. You filed something that's making waves. I'd think real hard about your future here if I were you." Cedric looked at him. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm advising you. There's a difference." Prescott walked away. Cedric stood there, alone, the fluorescent lights buzzing above him. And while all of this was happening, while the department quietly rearranged itself to push Cedric into a corner, Sergeant Vincent Hargrove continued his routine without interruption. He showed up to community basketball games. He posed for photos at a school assembly. He shook hands at a city council event where the mayor publicly thanked him for his dedication to Ocala's youth. His smile was wide, his uniform was pressed, and no one around him had any idea what was coming. 3 weeks after Cedric filed his report, Kayla Simmons stopped going to school. Her attendance, which had already been slipping, collapsed entirely. She wouldn't eat breakfast. She wouldn't leave her room. Rochelle found her one night sitting on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m., staring at the wall, holding her phone. When Rochelle took the phone and scrolled through the messages, her hands started shaking. There were texts from an unsaved number. The language was careful at first, then possessive, then explicit. Phrases no adult should ever send to a child. Instructions. Threats disguised as affection. You know what happens if you talk. I'm the only one who cares about you. Don't ruin this. Rochelle screenshotted everything. Then she called Cedric directly. She had kept his card from the night of the first visit. He answered on the second ring. "Officer Tate, I've been calling the department for 2 weeks. Nobody's called me back. Nobody's come to talk to Kayla. Nobody's done anything." Cedric closed his eyes. He already knew. "I filed the report, Ms. Simmons. I put it in my lieutenant's hands." She was crying now. "Then why hasn't anyone come? Why is this man still out there? He's still texting her. He's still reaching her somehow." Cedric asked her to preserve the phone exactly as it was. Don't delete anything. Don't reply. Keep it somewhere safe. That night, after his shift, Cedric sat in his car in the department parking lot and pulled up his Bodycam log on the internal system. His footage from that Wednesday evening at Pinewood Gardens was still there. The report he had filed was listed as under review. It had not been assigned to a detective. No case number had been generated. No follow-up was logged. 3 weeks. A child had disclosed abuse on camera, and the system had done nothing. Cedric downloaded the footage to a personal drive. He copied the report. He saved the incident log.
He stored all of it in a lockbox at his apartment. If the department was going to bury this, they were going to have to bury it without the evidence. Cedric didn't go looking for the second victim. She found him through a woman named Loretta Fay. Loretta ran a small nonprofit on the west side of Ocala called Bridge Forward, a mentorship and tutoring program for at-risk girls between the ages of 12 and 17. She had worked with the police department's youth outreach before, but had quietly pulled away 2 years earlier. She never said why publicly, but when Cedric reached out to her through a mutual contact at a community church, she agreed to meet him at a coffee shop off Silver Springs Boulevard. She was cautious. She didn't want her name in any report, but she had something to say. "You're not the first person to notice something wrong with Hargrove." Cedric set his cup down. "What do you mean?" 2 years ago, a girl in my program, 14 years old, told her mother that Hargrove had been taking her on drives after sessions, buying her clothes. The mother filed a complaint with Internal Affairs. Loretta paused. They told her the investigation found no evidence. Then they told her if she kept pressing it, they'd refer her daughter for making a false statement. The family moved to Georgia the next month. The girl's name was Amira Odom. Cedric wrote it down. That night, he searched for Amira's mother through public records. He found a phone number in Savannah. He called. A woman answered. When Cedric explained who he was and why he was calling, the line went quiet for a long time. Then she started crying. "Nobody believed us. They said my daughter was lying. They said she'd be the one in trouble. We left because we were afraid." Cedric told her she wasn't alone anymore. He told her that another girl had come forward, and that this time, someone was listening. He didn't tell her that the someone was just one officer with a copied Bodycam file and no backup from the department that employed him. He didn't tell her that he was running out of people to trust. He just told her the truth would come out. And for the first time since he had filed that report, he felt the weight of a promise he wasn't entirely sure he could keep. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Cedric was told to report to the administrative wing at 10 a.m. No explanation, no context, just a time and a room number. When he arrived, Lieutenant Craig Dunmore was seated at one end of a long table. Beside him sat Captain Frank Sorrento, the precinct commander, a man Cedric had spoken to maybe 3 times in 6 years. Sorrento was 56, white, with a military haircut and a face that never seemed to move. He had run the precinct for 9 years and had a reputation for loyalty, not to the law, but to the department's image. "Sit down, Tate." Cedric sat. Sorrento opened a manila folder. "Officer Tate, we've received a complaint from the evidence unit regarding your handling of materials in a narcotics case from last quarter. There are discrepancies in the chain of custody that need to be addressed." Cedric's jaw tightened. He had never mishandled anything in his career. His record was clean. What discrepancies? "We'll get into that," Sorrento said. "For now, you're being placed on administrative desk duty pending an internal review. We'll also need your body cam returned for recalibration." Cedric looked at Dunmore. Dunmore didn't look back. "This is about the report I filed," Cedric said. Sorrento's expression didn't change. "This is about evidence handling, nothing more." Cedric stood slowly. He unclipped his body cam from his vest and placed it on the table. But he didn't panic, because 2 weeks earlier, sitting in his apartment at 1 a.m. with the blinds drawn, he had copied every file that mattered. The footage, the report, the incident log, the screenshots Rochelle had sent him of Kayla's messages. All of it was in a lockbox that no one in the department knew existed. That afternoon, Cedric made a phone call he had been hoping he would never need to make. Nadira Qureshi answered on the third ring. She was a civil rights attorney based in Jacksonville, sharp, relentless, and known across Florida for taking cases other lawyers wouldn't touch. Cedric told her everything. When he finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Then Nadira said 3 words that changed the trajectory of everything. "We go federal." 2 days later, Cedric sat in a windowless conference room on the 4th floor of the FBI field office in Jacksonville. Across from him were 2 agents from the Public Corruption Unit, Special Agent Rena Castillo and Special Agent Tom Brierly.
Nadira sat beside him, a legal pad already half full of notes. Cedric laid it all out. The call at Pinewood Gardens, Kayla's disclosure on his Bodycam, the report he filed with Dunmore, the silence that followed, Rochelle's calls to the department that were never returned, the messages on Kayla's phone, the second victim, Amira Odom, whose family had been pressured into retracting their complaint and fleeing the state, the sudden reassignment to overnight shifts, the locker move, the union warning, and finally, the fabricated internal investigation designed to strip him of his Bodycam and push him out. Castillo listened without interrupting. When Cedric finished, she asked one question. "Do you have the footage?" "Yes," Cedric said. "Every second of it." He handed over the drive. Castillo inserted it into a secure laptop. The room went silent as Kayla's voice filled the speakers. Small, shaking, 15 years old, describing things no child should ever have to describe. When the playback ended, Brierly looked at Castillo. She nodded once. Within 48 hours, the FBI opened a formal federal investigation into Sergeant Vincent Hargrove and the Ocala Police Department. Agents began pulling Hargrove's phone records, financial statements, and department communications under sealed warrants. What they found went further than even Cedric had feared. Hargrove had been in contact with at least 5 minors outside any official program capacity. Late-night calls, prepaid phones, cash withdrawals of $200 and $300 at a time, all coinciding with dates the outreach program held evening sessions. The pattern was methodical, practiced, and it had been going on for years. Cedric drove back to Ocala that evening in silence. His hands gripped the wheel. The streetlights blurred past. He had done what the department refused to do. He had taken it outside the walls. And now, for the first time since that Wednesday night at Pinewood Gardens, he felt something shift beneath the surface. Not relief, not safety, but the slow turning of a machine far bigger and far more unforgiving than the one that had tried to silence him. The retaliation accelerated. Internal Affairs formally charged Cedric with conduct unbecoming an officer, then added a second allegation: unauthorized duplication and removal of department property. Someone had checked the download logs. They knew he'd copied the Bodycam footage. Dunmore called him in. Door closed. "You made copies of department footage without authorization. That's a terminable offense." "I copied evidence of a crime that was reported and ignored," Cedric replied. Dunmore leaned forward. "Return every copy, every file, every drive." "That's not going to happen. Talk to my attorney." He walked out. That afternoon, Nadira Qureshi filed a federal whistleblower protection motion in the Middle District of Florida, arguing the footage was material evidence in an active federal investigation and that any attempt to seize or destroy it constituted obstruction. Judge Evelyn Cortez issued a temporary restraining order within 24 hours. The department was prohibited from disciplining Cedric or destroying any Bodycam recordings. The order landed on Sorrento's desk like a grenade. He called Dunmore. "They've got a federal judge involved. How far did this go?" Dunmore didn't answer. Meanwhile, word reached Hargrove through a friend inside the department. The feds were asking questions. That night, Hargrove sat in his kitchen and snapped a prepaid phone in half. He drove to a gas station and threw the pieces into a dumpster. He deleted messages from a second device and wiped an email account he thought no one knew about. What he didn't know was that the FBI had already obtained everything through sealed warrants 2 weeks earlier. Every text, every call log, every transaction. The evidence he was trying to destroy had already been copied, cataloged, and stored in a federal evidence locker in Jacksonville. He was erasing ghosts. The originals were already gone. The FBI didn't need the story to go public. They needed it to go deeper. Without any press coverage, agents quietly interviewed families connected to the youth outreach program across Ocala and Marion County. 3 more families came forward within 2 weeks. The first was Gwendolyn Pratt. Her daughter, 13 at the time, had been paired with Hargrove through the mentorship track. The rides home started within a month.
then gifts, a tablet, a prepaid phone. When the girl started pulling away, skipping meals, flinching at loud noises, Gwendolyn confronted her. The girl broke down. Gwendolyn went to the police. She sat in the lobby for 2 hours. A week later, a detective told her the investigation found insufficient evidence. No one had interviewed her daughter. The second family described an identical pattern. When the mother confronted Hargrove at a community event, he showed up at her apartment the next day in full uniform. He stood in her doorway and told her that making false accusations against a police officer was a felony. She never filed a report. The third family had gone to internal affairs 2 full years before Amira Odom's case. Their complaint was logged, assigned a number, and closed within 11 days. No interviews, no evidence collected. Disposition, unsubstantiated. The FBI now had 5 victims spanning nearly a decade. 5 families who had tried to sound the alarm. 5 times the department had shut it down. Cedric was brought back to Jacksonville for a 4-hour deposition. At the end, Castillo closed her file. Your Bodycam footage is the single most important piece of evidence in this case. The first time a disclosure was captured in real time on a responding officer's own device. She paused. We're going to make sure it counts. Cedric nodded. He drove home with the windows down and the radio off. The weight hadn't lifted, but for the first time, it had shifted to somewhere it belonged. The arrest came at 5 a.m. on a Wednesday. FBI agents moved simultaneously across 3 locations. At his home on the north side of Ocala, Sergeant Vincent Hargrove was pulled from his bed in boxer shorts and an undershirt. He stood blinking under the porch light as agents cuffed him in front of neighbors who had already stepped outside at the sound of the vehicles. He was charged with multiple federal counts, including sexual exploitation of minors, coercion under color of authority, and civil rights violations. At the precinct, Lieutenant Craig Dunmore was escorted out of his office in full view of the morning shift. Officers stood frozen in the hallway as federal agents walked him past the briefing room in handcuffs. He was charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy to deprive civil rights for burying Cedric's report and orchestrating retaliation against him. Captain Frank Sorrento was arrested at his home. Conspiracy. Failure to act on mandatory reporting obligations. The police chief was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Only now did the story break. Local news ran the arrests before noon. By evening, it was statewide. The details hit the public like a wall. A police sergeant running a youth program. 5 victims. A decade of abuse. A department that knew and did nothing. Protests gathered outside the Ocala Police Department by nightfall. The mayor held a press conference distancing himself from Hargrove, despite appearing beside him in promotional photos for the outreach program just 4 months earlier. He called the allegations deeply disturbing and promised full cooperation with federal authorities. Cedric watched the coverage from his apartment, alone. The television light flickering against the walls. He saw Hargrove's booking photo. He saw Dunmore's name on the screen. He saw the precinct he had worked in for 6 years, surrounded by people demanding answers. He didn't feel relief. He didn't feel victory. He felt the quiet, heavy truth that everything he had endured, the isolation, the threats, the fabricated charges, had led to this single evening, and that it had almost not happened at all. The federal trial began 4 months later in the United States District Court for the Middle District of Florida. The courtroom was packed from the first morning. Prosecutors opened with Cedric's Bodycam footage. The recording played on 2 large monitors facing the jury. 12 people sat in silence as a 15-year-old girl's voice filled the room. Small, shaking, describing what a man with a badge had done to her over the course of 5 months. The footage was unedited. 14 minutes of Kayla Simmons sitting on concrete steps, pulling at her sleeves, unable to look at the camera. Rochelle standing behind her, arms crossed, tears running down her face. And Cedric's voice, steady and careful, asking the questions that no one else in his department had been willing to ask. When the footage ended, no one in the courtroom moved. Kayla testified behind a screen. Her voice was older now, harder, but it cracked in the same places. Amira Odom's mother testified via video link from Georgia, weeping as she described how the department had threatened her family into silence. 3 other victims gave statements. The evidence was overwhelming. Phone records, financial trails, prepaid devices, cash withdrawals matching outreach session dates. Then the prosecutors read the emails. One from Dunmore to a staff sergeant, instructing him to slow walk the Tate report and keep it off the weekly log. Another from Sorrento to Dunmore, written 11 days after Cedric filed his complaint. The words appeared on the courtroom monitors in black and white. Hargrove is too valuable to lose over teenage drama. Let it die quietly. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Dunmore and Sorrento, now cooperating for reduced sentences, each pointed the finger at the other and at Hargrove. The jury watched both men minimize their roles while the evidence proved they had actively shielded a predator. Hargrove's defense tried to discredit the victims. It didn't work. The footage existed. The records existed. The pattern was undeniable. The jury deliberated for 1 day. When they returned, the foreperson didn't look at the defense table. That told everyone in the courtroom what was coming. Guilty.
On every count. The courtroom exhaled. Rochelle Simmons pressed both hands to her mouth. 2 other mothers held each other in the second row. Cedric sat in the back, in civilian clothes, his hands folded in his lap. He didn't move. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. The courtroom was standing room only. Judge Evelyn Cortez, the same judge who had issued the restraining order protecting Cedric's footage months earlier, presided. She addressed Hargrove directly. You were given a badge and a program designed to protect children. You used both as a hunting ground. You identified vulnerable girls. You isolated them. You abused them. And when they tried to speak, the men around you made sure no one listened. Hargrove stood motionless. His attorney had advised him to show remorse. He showed nothing. The judge continued. The officers who shielded you are not bystanders. They are participants. This court holds them accountable not because they pulled the trigger, but because they handed you the weapon and looked away while you used it. She sentenced Hargrove to 63 years in federal prison, effectively a life sentence. He would die behind bars. Dunmore received 12 years for obstruction and conspiracy. Sorrento received 8. 2 additional officers who had been aware of prior complaints and failed to act received lesser sentences. A sketch artist in the front row captured Hargrove's face as the number was read. His expression was blank. His eyes were fixed on the table. He did not look at the families. He did not look at anyone. Kayla was not in the courtroom. She had asked not to be. But Rochelle was there. And when the judge's gavel came down, Rochelle closed her eyes, lowered her head, and whispered something no microphone picked up. Only she and God knew what it was. The fallout moved fast. Within weeks, the city of Ocala entered a federal consent decree. The entire youth outreach program was dissolved. Not restructured, not reformed, dissolved. A new program would be built from the ground up under civilian oversight with independent background checks, mandatory reporting protocols, and a review board with subpoena power. The police chief resigned without a public statement. His office was cleared within 48 hours. A civil lawsuit filed by the families of all 5 victims named the city, the department, and the individual officers. The case never went to trial. The city settled for a multi-million-dollar sum that legal observers described as one of the largest police misconduct payouts in Central Florida history. As part of the agreement, the department was required to release all internal affairs records related to complaints against Hargrove. What came out was staggering. 14 complaints spanning 9 years. 14 families who had come forward in some way. Not one resulted in meaningful action. Cedric was reinstated with full back pay and a formal letter clearing him of all internal charges. The fabricated evidence handling complaint was expunged from his record. But the damage was already done. 6 months of isolation, threats, a career weaponized against him for doing his job. He requested a transfer and was accepted by the Marion County Sheriff's Office. He reported to his new post on a Monday morning. New badge, new unit, same body cam. Nadira Qureshi used the case as a foundation. She filed civil rights suits on behalf of 3 other officers across Florida who had faced retaliation for reporting misconduct. Each case cited Cedric's as precedent. Each one moved forward. The system hadn't worked on its own. It had been forced to work, dragged into accountability by one officer who refused to close his eyes and one attorney who knew exactly which doors to kick open. Months later, Cedric Tate agreed to a single interview. He sat across from a journalist in a quiet room at the Marion County Sheriff's Office. Still in uniform, body cam clipped to his vest. He spoke slowly, carefully, the way he always did. People ask me if I'd do it again. He paused. I think about that question more than I should. Because the honest answer is it almost broke me. He described the loneliness, the overnight shifts in silence, the locker moved to the basement, the officers who turned their backs, the union rep who told him to think about his future. The morning Sorrento and Dunmore sat across from him and tried to take the one piece of evidence that mattered. I wasn't brave, Cedric said. I was terrified. Every single day. I just kept thinking about that girl on the steps, 15 years old, telling me the truth because she thought someone would finally do something. He looked down at his hands. If I had walked away from that, I wouldn't be able to wear this uniform. I wouldn't deserve to. He talked about Amira, the girl whose family had been run out of the state, the complaint that was buried years before Kayla ever sat on those steps. She never got justice the first time, Cedric said. That stays with me. He said the system didn't work. People made it work. By refusing to look away, by keeping copies when they were told to delete, by walking into federal offices when their own department shut the door. The interview ended quietly. No dramatic statement, no rehearsed closing line. Just a man in uniform who had done what the men above him refused to do, and paid for it in ways most people would never see. The piece closes with Cedric walking through the Marion County Sheriff's Office at the start of a new shift. Body cam on, red light steady. He steps into his patrol car, adjusts his mirror, and pulls out of the lot. The narrator's voice returns. Vincent Hargrove will die in federal prison. The officers who protected him lost their badges, their freedom, and their names. And a 15-year-old girl's trembling voice on a body cam recording, footage that was nearly seized, nearly buried, nearly erased, brought down an entire chain of command. Not because the system worked, because one man wouldn't let it fail. If you think this situation was bad, wait until you see what happens in the case on the right-hand side.